Good morning. Today's topics for conversation involve real estate law and environmental law. These are advanced classes in the second or third year of law school. And here at MCC, these two topics, while we've touched on these a little bit in previous chapters, would definitely be advanced curriculum. I'm going to start with environmental law first. And environmental law can occur on a federal level involving the National Environmental Protection Agency Act, and that set up the EPA. That is one of our branches of government. Its prosecution or criminal prosecutions fall under the Department of Justice. So you can be criminally prosecuted for an environmental violation, but the department itself is a cabinet level position. It has an agency. It has had various chiefs under our current president, responsible for all sorts of federal legislation, most of which began in the 1970s. And I'm just going to highlight the environmental interests that are protected. Of course, you all know that air is protected. You have to bring your car up to the admissions center here in Crystal Lake. You know that our water is protected. There's a Water Act. You know that our soil is protected. You know that solid waste is protected. There are rules about how you get rid of your trash that fall under that administration. But additionally, some people aren't aware that light is regulated. Many subdivisions fight with, businesses putting up gas stations with lots of lights or lights that affect our light pollution. There's also pests are regulated, as is noise is regulated, sometimes manifesting itself in local noise ordinances. Radiation is also regulated. And finally, what do we use land use and zoning for? Additionally, hazardous waste is regulated. If any of you are currently bringing your recyclables to either the Elgin Recycling Center or any of our village municipalities on Recycling Day, you know that computers and technology and televisions are all disposed of in different ways. Interesting to me, when I took this course in law school, I learned that whiteout, probably something you don't use anymore, but when we used to typing on a typewriter, you would use whiteout to cover your mistakes. And whiteout is environmentally protected. So you have different ways that cans of aerosols can be disposed of. These are all things under environmental law. Initially, also in the 70s, there were three big pieces of legislation, one of which is CERCLA, and two others involving disposal in landfills. So that's sort of an overview of Chapter 33 on environmental law. Your assignment in environmental law is to literally take a picture on your phone and upload it of an environmental sign that is in your workplace. And for this, you get 10 points. So what am I looking for? It could be a wash your hands sign. It could be a wear goggles in the workplace. It could be any number of signs that are put up either by the EPA, and the other federal administration is OSHA. That's the Occupational Safety Health Administration and their act, who have put up signs in our workplace telling us how to be more environmentally conscious. So for your assignment, you will have not only a quiz, you will have for 10 points, you will also have this picture to put up in lieu of a memo. That's your memo this week. And then you'll have a discussion forum about what do you see affecting the environment in Crystal Lake or McHenry County Colleges. Is it climate? Is it any of these particular types of pollution that we work to regulate? And it can be the explosion of a paint factory, any number of things that you think affect our environment on a day-to-day basis. That is our focus with environmental law. Many of you, when you talked about your administrative agencies, have selected the EPA, so you probably know what has happened under the current administration in terms of funding for either these agencies on a federal level or on a state level, and that you may have discussed those with me already on Administrative Agency Week. but that is the first part of this course this week. That is environmental law. And moving on off of environmental law and onto real estate law, environmental law is about real estate. It is about what is going on with real property. And the reading assignments for this week involve chapters 32 through 35. 35 is on landlord-tenant law. 34 is on buying and selling property. 32 is kinds of property, and that's also what 33 is about. So your assignment this week starts off with you writing a memo for 10 points, telling me, and using 6 to 10 vocabulary words, what kind of property do you live on? And since, according to my class list, nobody in this class is homeless, everybody has an address that I've been furnished. You either are someone's tenant or landlord, and you are then leasing or renting property, or you may have bought or sold property, or may live with parents that have bought and sold property. So I am looking for you to go to those 2 chapters, pick out vocabulary, and tell me in a memo, what is your current property status? If you are bartering, say you live with your parents and you do the dishes and you mow the lawn, perhaps you're bartering from your parents. But nobody's homeless in this class, so everybody can accomplish the memo assignment for this class. Then we also have a 10-point quiz to take. It's on the rest of the lecture I'm going to give today, and we combine the discussion forum with the environmental discussion forum for the week. So, now talking a little bit about property. Where did we talk about this initially in this course? We started talking about it under tort law in week 4, folks, because we talked about an old English concept called chattel, and trespass to land and to chattel. That is the basic right that we are protecting under the law. If you own a car, you own chattel. And we talked about an intentional tort of trespass to land or chattel. And speaking of land is held in Illinois using 3 kinds of ownership deeds. A quitclaim, a warranty deed, or a trustee's deed from a land trust. And then you can hold this property in 3 different ways. You can hold it as tenants in common. This is likely when you and a roommate own something together, but you have no relationship to each other. So that when one of you dies, the survivorship goes to your heirs. It does not go to the other co-owner. The second form of ownership is called joint tenancy. This is most commonly used when one is married. And this means if one of you dies, in terms of survivorship, the property is transferred to the co-owner. Finally, and this also works if you're selling it. You certainly can't sell it and not have your wife upset if you sell the house out from under her, or husband. And the final kind, which was created in the 1990s, is called tenancy by the entirety. It is when something is jointly owned, but you put a creditor's shield around the house so that only if both parties incur a debt can the house be taken. So if you are a lawyer or a doctor, perchance, and you want to protect your primary marital residence from being taken in a malpractice case, you would put the house in tenancy by the entirety. It's got the same ownership properties as if you and your spouse were joint tenants, but there is a creditor shield wrapped around the house so that if you were sued, your wife couldn't be, and you couldn't be put out of your house. So that is the basic underlying properties of real estate law, noting that when we get into corporate matters with our property, the concept of chattel is now referred to in an updated term. It's called personal property or a fixture. To be a fixture, a personal property fixture, either a trade or business one is also included, it must be attached to the building. That is another concept that we cover. We bring that chattel's concept in from torts into this particular class. Additionally, we talk about people that come onto our property, and we talk about those that are invitees. We talk about those that are trespassers. I think that was obvious to you in Torts Week as to what a trespasser was, or someone who trespasses. Then we have licensees. This is a license that you might give to a utility company to come and work on the bottom of your yard. And then we also have one more concept, and that is a nuisance. And when we talk about attractive nuisance, we were talking about someone like a small child who wanders onto your property, may fall into your swimming pool. So these are how we refer to people coming onto our property. And by giving them these various classifications as to whether they were invited to a party, they have walked across your grass when they're not supposed to, they had permission but only to the bottom of your yard, or whether they're an attractive nuisance, we classify what you can recover if they cause damage on your property, or if perhaps they get injured on your property. When does your insurance kick in if these are people on your physical property? Additionally, many of you know the old-fashioned term that we called squatters' rights, which we cover, and it's got more upgraded terms now, which is an easement or a prescriptive easement, where someone is walking across your backyard for 20 years and then they can assert that they now own the land. We have elements of that we will be covering in this chapter. And again, those folks initially start out as trespassers and somehow become owners of strips of land on. So if you have someone who is cutting through your yard, you have to make sure you let them know whether you're giving them permission or not to do so. And there are elements that are covered in this assignment on to properly characterize someone if they're a squatter or if you gave them an easement. Last concept I want to cover here under real estate law is, well, of course you know a lease is a contract, and we covered contracts, and you know under the statute of frauds, leasing property must be in writing. We talked about that under Tort Week. We've talked about that under Contracts Week, and we're mentioning it again. So if you have a lease, even with your parents or someone who's a family member, you should have that in writing. The City of Chicago has a pro-buyer lease, meaning there are protections built in there if your water doesn't work, if there's not heat, those kinds of things. Not necessarily all the leases out in the northwest suburbs are as friendly as the ones to the tenant as the one downtown is. You need to start looking at your lease terms to see if they're onerous for or against a tenant. And you can look under the modules. I have put a sample, I've put up sample leases and sample real estate contracts. So finally finishing up with real estate law, if you were to sell, and you're going to give me a memo on this, or buy a piece of property, there are 10 essential documents. And the first is the contract. Must be in writing, you know, because of the statute of frauds. The next is your personal property sale agreement, which is also called your bill of sale. Bill of sale. The next most important document is the title insurance. This is where a title company in Illinois will trace back and make sure that the person who's selling to you has ownership, and they will guarantee that they have ownership. Then there is your real estate transfer tax forms. And then we also have, additionally, we have an affidavit of title. We have, and that is filled out where you say, hey, since I ordered the title, I've not let no one work on the property that I haven't paid. Additionally, you will have a HUD form that documents who got what in the transaction. You may have what I call the golden handcuffs, which is a mortgage, where you have a lender involved in the transaction who's giving you the loan for the money to buy the property. Additionally, you'll have a realtor's fee to pay, probably, and their documentation as to what they get paid. But critical pieces of documentation are the contract, which sets out the terms, the title insurance. Then you have the deed, which we talked about earlier, which will be in 3 different forms. This is critical. You don't leave a house closing without the title insurance, the deed, of course the keys. And finally there's affidavit of title, and there's another affidavit that you've had nobody work on the property that you have not paid. So those are the 10 basic documents if you are selling or buying a piece of property in Illinois. And those would be spelled out in more detail in Chapter 34, and you will either put them in your memo or you'll go through a lease. And you want to tell me in your lease memo, what was your security deposit? What are the terms of your lease? Are there any exclusions, like you can't have dogs or plants or flags? And the other thing to note, which people do not understand, is there is a difference between a condo and a townhome. With a townhome, you need a survey, and that's probably the 11th document I should spell out here, to tell you what land you inherited. And if you have a condo, you'll have the condo decks that tell you your common ownership with your neighbors, which you may also have in a townhome, but the condos typically don't have land. So that's an overview of real estate law and what you need to know in order to pass Business 241, 001, 002, or 003, and the basics of what you need to know about how real estate provides property rights and provides ownership or provides other covenants of enjoyment. And I look forward to reading your memos, your quizzes, and your discussion boards on both of these topics. So, looking forward to your work on these 2 topics, real estate law and environmental law, and your photos of something that you consider an environmental warning from the EPA or OSHA. If you say to me, Mary, I can't find anything, I don't have a job, there's certainly pictures here of no smoking, no handguns, that you can also take just by walking around campus and doing that assignment in 2 seconds. But in order to get the full points for those picture assignments, you have to tell me where you took the photo and what agency is involved with regulating that photo. So, looking forward to hearing more from you about real estate and environmental law and those chapters in our Saylor textbook.